Okay, it is early January, which means it's depth chart season when it comes to the Irish rugby team for the Six Nations, and I'm delighted to say Alison Miller is with us. Alison, good morning to you. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, good. Getting to that stage where the team news is coming through from other countries about injuries that are going to take players out of the Six Nations, and we're like, so far, it's actually... So Sexton got injured, but it looks like he's going to be back. So far, touch wood, with loads of games to still be played, we're in a relatively good spot, which means picking your depth chart is fairly straightforward, I think. From your perspective, we've asked you for the wingers, centres and fullback, and this isn't very complicated at the moment, is it?
I'm laughing at that because I found it quite hard. I found it difficult. Obviously, because you're looking at the different provinces and who's playing well. And like some provinces there aren't playing particularly well, and then you're judging it on like when they go into camp, who performs in camp and who's bringing form in, and then who fits into the system and who works well together. So I didn't think it was that straightforward. But my 11 was James Lowe. My 12 is Bundy Aki. Now that's presuming that Henshaw is out. I'm just ruling him out. He might be back, he might not be, but I'm just ruling him out. 13, Gary Ringrose. 14, Mac Hansen. And 15, Hugo Keenan.
Let's start with Mac Hansen. He got the haircut. I still haven't seen the haircut, but everybody's raving about it.
I haven't either.
It's apparently the first time since he got to Ireland he's had his haircut, which is okay, right? There was like
interesting timing.
Well, it is. He said his form was a bit listless over the last few weeks, and then bounced back after the haircut. So anyway, because he's got the scrum cap on, I can't tell the difference. But we were talking about this at the end of the year, looking back, and one of the questions in the crappy quiz was, when did he make his debut? And if you told me he made his debut in the middle of COVID for Ireland, I would have said, yeah, that makes sense. But it was only last year in the Six Nations that he made his first full start, which, when you think about it, is a meteoric rise. And he's straight in, and no one's blinking there.
Yeah, he looks very comfortable playing for Ireland, and he's consistently played well for Ireland when he's got his opportunities. Like, I think he's a kind of winger that Andy Farr likes. He gets off his wing, he gets involved, he goes roaming. He's very good in the air, and he's impressed every time he's got an opportunity for Ireland. He's impressed. I think that just says it all about him. He's obviously a guy for the big day, and that shows. So, like, he hasn't done anything wrong. Obviously, you know, sometimes your form in a province, or, you know, your quality of ball that you're getting can affect your form. And that's why I'm saying, like, sometimes then when you go into camp, things can change up, and who's performing in a Six Nations camp, you know, it can be not as straightforward as that, and who slots in well into the system that they're trying to play. But I've been very impressed with him since he's debuted for Ireland, and he's scored some good tries, and he's constantly been involved.
Yeah, I don't know if we understood that he was an X-Factor style player when he was in the team, but as soon as he scored the try against France that time, you're like, all right, okay, I didn't... What? We never scored tries like that. That's amazing.
Yeah, he has a bit of flair, and I think you can see in his personality, he's a bit of a character. And I think sometimes as a winger, I think you have to have a bit of that flamboyance nearly. You have to have that willingness to do something special and try things, and he certainly has that. And I'd say from his rugby that he really enjoys it. So I think playing at that high level and where there's pressure, I'd say it suits him. It suits his personality.
James Lowe obviously is on the other wing, and Lowe, brilliant in the 3-test series against the All Blacks, and then was injured for ages, and there was an opportunity there for other people to come in and stake a claim, and we really wanted to see how Backline would do, and Backline did okay. He did like totally fine for somebody who's at that few caps stage, but unfortunately at the weekend, another hamstring injury from Backline. The Belfast Telegraph are speculating that might put his Six Nations in doubt, and so that's a bit of a disaster from his perspective. So who else is close to these two at the moment? Who's pushing either of these two to get into the team for you?
I think Jimmy O'Brien and Larimer for me are, like, Larimer is starting to come into kind of the form that he showed probably, form that he shows when he's playing really well. He obviously was man of the match there. Was it last weekend or the weekend before? He's got really good feet. And then Jimmy O'Brien, obviously, he's quite versatile in that he could cover, obviously, 15 as well. But the two of those guys, I think, would be, for me, pushing those two, James Lowe and Mac Hansen. And Like O'Brien is one of these people that just does the simple things well. He's a good distributor, defensively good. Obviously we don't need to talk. We all know what Larmour can do. His amazing feet, and he was really, really good 2 weekends ago. So for me, those two guys are there and thereabouts, and who knows within the environment of Six Nations camps how things might look. So those two for me were kind of the ones that are staking a claim, or potentially still be in it. We don't know, I suppose, the ins and outs of the internal workings of, as I keep saying, a camp environment and who's training and playing well.
Is this Six Nations, Alison, a perfect opportunity to play someone like Jimmy O'Brien a little bit more, especially when it's a World Cup year, especially when you maybe want to give some players a rest? I know the World Cup is still months and months away, but it's an opportunity to showcase players and to see what they can do in a pressurised environment.
Yeah, it's the age-old argument that I think if we're actually seriously going to try and contest a World Cup for once and not come back and talk about this after, we got to actually try people. And if we're looking at, to me, Hugo Keenan is nailed on 15. He is so solid. He's so consistent. He's a good distributor. He's very good in the air. He's quite evasive without, I suppose, sometimes you look at him and he kind of sliding and weaving through tackles that he shouldn't get through. So for me, could you play someone like Jimmy O'Brien at 15 in a game during the Six Nations and try out these combinations? Because Hugo Keenan can't play every game in the World Cup. So for me, it is about putting guys into pressurised situations in a big competition and seeing how they perform, so then that they're ready for a World Cup. We don't want to be talking about the same thing after this World Cup. There will be no point if, and other people have different opinions on this. That would be my opinion on it. I think you have to do that.
I think you're right. I think it's the definition of insanity to keep doing the same thing and expecting something different. And I think you raised the point, if we're serious about this, within the IRFU's business plan, we don't plan to reach a semi-final. We don't bank on it. We don't, and competing in the Six Nations is the be-all and end-all. That's the bread and butter. That's where all of the funding,
money comes from.
Yeah. And it's okay, but that's where the money comes from, because we've never tried. We don't know what it would be like. We don't know how much extra revenue you would generate if we were to reach a semi-final, with a team that's doing well at world level. We don't know what it would be like to dream of being the World Cup winners. We can't dream about that. I mean, that's...
Yeah, because what would that do? It would make every young boy and girl out there want to play the game. That might be going down other sports because it's not them. It's just something that's not capturing their attention. But what better way to capture attention so you get more people into the game, and then that will start to yield results. So
you're from a GAA family, right? Steeped in GAA. So what do you make
completely
of that? What do you make of? I watched your dad play for a tie in the 80s. What do you make of that joy that so many people in the GAA community take whenever the rugby team fails?
I think it's changing. I think I'm actually in a room and we'll have to walk. The lights are going. I think you see me. 2 seconds. There are censored lights. Give me a minute.
We were having issues ourselves this morning. It is something that.
Sorry, technology. I'm back. So I think that's changing. I think definitely the rugby community or the GA community definitely feel more part of rugby, and I think maybe there is still that, I suppose, exclusivity to some parts of rugby, and maybe they just feel a little bit, removed from that if that's not their avenue. Obviously, guys like Sean O'Brien, Tyke Furlong, and all these guys that have come up through the club system have kind of changed the game. But I definitely think I'd be still involved heavily in GAA, helping with a team in Carlow at the moment, and the majority would really get behind rugby. They would. I would have to say that majority will go watch it and they'll go to the games, and but I think the next step is sometimes they don't feel like they could play, and that's kind of the issue. So they'll support it and they'll enjoy it and they'll watch the World Cups and they'll watch Six Nations and they'll go to games, but it's why do they maybe feel like they won't play? So and some of them are playing, but it would probably be a small cohort of any what's the word, group of people in other sports that will take satisfaction in seeing another sport lose. You know, I'm sure that's the same in other sports.
Yeah,
But,
look, there's definitely a soccer crowd who also have the same feelings about, you know, the only shared crossover of the Venn diagram is a shared hatred for the rugby team doing well. And look, I understand there's a lot of hype around the rugby team, but I do wonder if there's at the core of it is a fear of if the rugby team actually delivered on what they were capable of doing, then a lot of heads would be turned and a lot of time and investment and energy, and the best young players in the country would aspire to be rugby players as opposed to playing GAA or soccer.
Yeah, that's probably definitely the case. I think because it is quite compared to soccer, even, like, I mean, if you, no disrespect maybe the League of Ireland, but if you wanted to make it big in soccer, you might have to go off to England or whatever. Within Ireland, you've got your 4 provinces there within reach, and you become professional, and it's attractive. And so yeah, maybe there is that fear, but I think also on the other side of it, some of our most promising athletes, as you know yourself, being involved in GAA, like you look at any club team or county team, and the athleticism of those guys and girls is phenomenal, and it's what our country plays. It's like, I think we have to even look at a bigger picture. Like, if you think of, I'm from Laois, I mean, there's only 2 rugby clubs in the whole of Laois, but I mean, within a small area where I'm from, you've got like a lot of GAA clubs, and it's kind of, they love playing. And so, like, if we had success in a World Cup, what could that do? You get so much more people playing, maybe more clubs, and who knows, we could be like world beaters. Like, you know, I'm ambitious. But, you know, it's an interesting one, because I think there's still probably a small cohort, if you're thinking of, like, say, Leinster rugby, outside of Dublin. It's probably not as extensive as, you know, your areas in Dublin that are playing rugby.
Definitely loads of work to be done. Definitely loads. Sorry, that was a complete tangent of discussion there. Sorry to throw it on you.
Just go off on a tangent.
But I think it is an interesting an interesting thing to think about at this stage, when we could do it more depth. We could definitely do it more depth. To go back to the depth chart, you pick Bundy Aki at 12 and you pick Gary Ringrose at 13 on the basis, really, as you said, that Henshaw isn't fit at the moment. We thought McCluskey was kind of getting to that stage where he might be in consideration for this, but he's just not as good as Bundy or as effective as Bundy.
Yeah, like, I thought, like, he did impress me in the autumn internationals, and he was obviously unlucky in that first game to do the arm injury, and he came back. But I think, like, he did well. I'm not saying he didn't do well, but I don't think he just did enough to kind of usurp Bundy Aki. I think Bundy Aki has that test match experience. He's proven at that level, and I think he's obviously huge physicality, and he's proven. So I think, like, McCluskey is not too far behind, but I think he just did, like, he's obviously McCluskey. He's a great, because brilliant ability to offload. He's physical. He's quite a good distributor, and we're seeing more of that, especially when he was in green. And but I just don't think he's just done enough to stake the claim to be over Bundy in that sense.
You had Hugo Keenan, was it at 15? Alison as well. Like,
yeah.
I'm looking at last year's Six Nations squad, and you see someone like Michael Lowry in there, and I know he's just returned back into the Ulster team as well after being rested. But, like, will the Ulster players, for example, suffer as a result of their absolutely shocking form?
Potentially, but I think at the same time, depends how Andy Farrell is doing it. He knows the calibre of those Ulster players and what they can produce, and, like, you know, that can happen. Like, it would happen to me over the years, where you mightn't have had a particularly good lead into Six Nations playing for your province, and you didn't play well. But I mean, at the end of the day, Andy Farrell knows what they're capable, and if they're in a system, which they are in Irish, and there's certain things going on, I mean, there has to be that element too, that once they come into camp, they should have time to maybe see what they're about. But it doesn't help. It doesn't help matters. Because Mike Lowry, like, he's like an exciting player. He's a good distributor, and, like, as I said, I don't think Hugo Keenan can, like, if we're going to be smart about trying to achieve at a World Cup, I don't think maybe he should play every single game in the Six Nations. Like, that's just my opinion, and I would be very different to a lot of people on this. But because I'd be thinking more about trying to achieve at a World Cup as opposed to having the same old argument after. I'm sick of it. Like,
yeah.
So yeah, I think potentially it might affect them just slightly, you know, but you're hoping that they'll get the opportunity if they get chosen into a camp, into a squad.
Alison, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning. Cheers.
No hassle, guys. Have a good day. Bye bye.
That's Alison Miller there, giving us her thoughts on the depth